We want to find which map works for us to help us.
A new strategy in El Cajon, the new maps that may help increase diversity in city leadership.
We're asking them to pour concrete. Maybe when environmentalists ask somebody to pour concrete, maybe they should listen.
Warnings ignored. New questions following a federal investigation into a dam breach in Northern California.
Put your books on the shelf, on the shelf. Put your books on the shelf.
The musical cues to help toddlers transition and the science behind their brain development. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Today, President Trump signed a bill extending the Veterans Choice Program, Congress's proposed solution to a 2014 VA wait time scandal. And while Veterans Choice hasn't worked as well as Congress had hoped, KPBS reporter Steve Walsh says it will buy the VA more time to come up with a better long-term solution.
It was supposed to be simple. Back in 2014, veterans were waiting weeks and months for care at VA clinics, so Congress invested $10 billion, mainly to allow veterans to see doctors outside the VA. 3 years later, Congress's solution is widely seen as flawed. Nationally, overall wait times are still above what they were when the law passed. There were questions over how the program was administered by the VA and its outside contractors like Tri-West, which covers California.
This new law is a good start, but there is still much work to do. We will fight each and every day to deliver the long-awaited reforms our veterans deserve.
Veterans' Choice was set to end in August. The bill signed Wednesday was largely seen as a stopgap while lawmakers work out what VA Secretary David Shulkin called Veterans' Choice 2.0. The VA is expected to release its plan later this year, in time for lawmakers to begin hearings this summer. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
San Diego activist Hugo Castro is recovering in a hospital outside Mexico City after he was found beaten on the street. He had been missing for nearly 5 days. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero says Mexico's Attorney General is investigating.
Mexico's Attorney General got an anonymous tip about his whereabouts yesterday afternoon. Castro was on the street in a neighborhood north of Mexico City with injuries all over his body. Enrique Morones of the nonprofit Border Angels says he's very worried about his volunteers' health.
Hugo did suffer some physical damage, quite extensive physical damage, and I don't know how he suffered it, but he's in pretty bad shape. So we're trying to get him back to San Diego, and I'm working with the authorities to see if we can get him over here to one of the hospitals here.
Castro is currently in a Red Cross hospital in the state of Mexico. Morones says Castro didn't have his documents on him when he was found, so the U.S. Embassy is working to get his passport. Hugo Castro went missing after pleading for help on Facebook Live, saying he was being hunted by a criminal organization. It's still very unclear what happened to Castro or why. Castro had received multiple death threats related to his work to protect migrants in Mexico. Migrants are a main source of income for drug cartels who have diversified into things like human trafficking and kidnapping for ransom. Castro was on his way to help refugees when he went missing last week. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
Coming up Friday, San Diego is on the agenda for a border tour by U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Secretary of Homeland Security John Kelly. Kelly visited San Diego in February when he met with area law enforcement leaders. Friday's visit is part of a tour of the southwestern border area. It begins tomorrow in El Paso. According to the Department of Homeland Security, while in San Diego, they plan on watching border and immigration detention operations, and then they'll hold a press conference. People who live in El Cajon gathered last night to decide how to redraw their new district boundaries. This is a first for the city. They've always elected city council members in a citywide election. KPBS reporter Claire Tregesser says the aim of the new approach is to increase diversity on the council.
This one doesn't work because they divide the downtown into 4 districts.
Nadir Al-Samari is reviewing maps that show different ways El Cajon City Council districts could be drawn. He says for him, the maps must have one thing.
Any map that divide the downtown into 1 or 2 districts, I think this one would work for my people.
That's because the majority of El Cajon's Middle Eastern population lives downtown. Al-Samari is Iraqi and wants to set up districts where Middle Eastern people are in the majority.
So we'll be able to have 1 or 2 people to represent us as Middle Easterns, to tell Americans about us, who we are, and without any stereotype or any previous judgment.
Increasing diversity on the city council is one of the reasons why El Cajon is adding council districts. Right now, the council is all men and all white except one person. Residents have had the past 3 months to weigh in on district maps or draw their own. And now the council has 18 submitted maps to choose from. They'll now decide which one is best over a series of 3 council meetings next month.
And that's why we are here. We want to find which map works for us to help us.
Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
Disabled passengers who use North County's transit shuttles may find it takes a bigger bite out of their budget in coming months. KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John says the service is changing, and so are the fares.
The number of people who use public transit has fallen, but ridership of North County Transit's service for people with disabilities has grown by more than 50% in the last 5 years. North County Transit District says a new contractor is taking over that service this summer, and fares for longer trips are going up. The new service will offer benefits such as 24-hour online reservations and easier ways to pay. Denise Brevel is with the National Federation of the Blind.
But all of that is going to be a moot point if we can't afford to ride.
North County Transit says an estimated 44% of disabled riders will see no change in fares, and those who cannot afford the increase will be offered training in how to ride the bus or the train. Allison St. John, KPBS News.
California is seeing a decrease in pedestrian deaths. That's according to new data by the Governor's Highway Safety Organization. Between January and June of last year, there was an 11% decrease from the year before. Nationwide, there was a 12% increase in pedestrian deaths. Experts say a new state law that makes it illegal for drivers to use cell phones while driving may have contributed to the improvement. San Diego County's air quality has dramatically improved since the year 2000, according to the American Lung Association. But a new report from the organization says things have recently taken a turn for the worse. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg explains.
The latest State of the Air report finds San Diego's particle pollution has dropped to record lows. Particle pollution includes dust, soot, and smoke. However, the number of unhealthy ozone days has risen the last 3 years. San Diego now ranks 7th among the nation's top 10 dirtiest cities for ozone pollution. 90% of the ozone pollution in San Diego County comes from cars and trucks. But there are some other factors at play, says Deborah Kelly with the American Lung Association.
We believe that over the last few years, we've seen this uptick in ozone levels due to climate change impacts. You know, we've had an extended drought. We've had a lot of heat waves, and those tend to increase and accelerate the formation of ozone.
Kelly says the way out of the ozone pollution conundrum is to get San Diegans to drive more electric vehicles. From Balboa Park, Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
Governor Jerry Brown thanked members of the League of Cities today for supporting the gas tax increase. The organization represents more than 400 California municipalities. And while Brown wouldn't say when he'll sign the bill, he did say it's the right solution for California.
Well, if you borrow $50 billion, it's going to cost you $100 billion. And you keep paying it even after you finished it. So why can't you pay as you go? Well, people say you can't pay as you go because we can't afford it. Well, can you afford to fix your roof? Can you afford to put oil in your car? Can you afford not to? So that's the point. There's certain things that there's no debate. You got to fix the roads.
The gas tax is expected to raise $5.2 billion a year for road repairs. The new tax is scheduled to hit the pumps November 1st. An Associated Press examination of the crisis at the Orville Dam in February has revealed a series of questionable decisions and misjudgments. Haven Daly has more.
As repair crews rush to fix the spillways at Northern California's Orville Dam, an Associated Press examination has found that the near disaster in February could have been avoided if those in charge had heeded warnings years ago. This was the scene as a swollen Lake Orville forced the use of a dam spillway. Officials worried that a deadly wave of water might be unleashed, and almost 200,000 people were evacuated from the area until crews were able to get the situation under control. Now, an AP examination has found numerous examples of questionable decisions and misjudgments by agencies responsible for the dam, including overseers overestimating the durability of the two spillways. Environmental groups are not surprised.
It nearly failed catastrophically, which is what we had feared and what we had filed.
Ron Stork and the group Friends of the River had warned the dam's keepers, including the California Department of Water Resources, for more than a decade that their analysis showed the Orville Dam and its spillways were inadequate. State water officials continue to defend their handling of the crisis, saying it was managed as effectively as possible under extraordinary circumstances, including one of the wettest winters on record. But those who tried to warn of the possible deficiencies at the dam say officials should have done more.
We're asking them to pour concrete. Maybe when environmentalists ask somebody to pour concrete, maybe they should listen.
A federally ordered investigation into what went wrong at the dam is now underway. Haven Daly, Associated Press, Sacramento.
Crews began treating San Diego waterways today. They're killing mosquito larvae in an effort to reduce the risk of potential transmission of the West Nile and Zika viruses. The aerial drops will target nearly 50 rivers, streams, ponds, and other waterways. Mosquitoes spread the West Nile virus, while an invasive form of the species is capable of carrying Zika. Although no mosquitoes in San Diego County have tested positive for Zika, all cases of the disease in San Diego have been sexually transmitted. Well, the AC may help you get through the rest of this week as San Diego heats up. Erin Calandra has the forecast.
We have a beautiful couple of days ahead of us. We do see a system to the north of us that's bringing plenty of rain to northern California, but it's definitely not going to make it down here. Looking closer, well, there's really nothing across our map, which means just beautiful weather. Tonight, 59 degrees for our overnight low, partly cloudy skies, and that's how it looks across the region. Borrego Springs, 60 degrees, Mount Laguna, 42, Ramona, 43, Poway 50 degrees, Alpine 44, Chula Vista 54, Oceanside 51 degrees with just a few clouds passing through. We do have a high pressure system. This is for your Saturday. It's over the ocean, the Pacific, and it's going to be moving inland, which means it's going to improve weather across the Southwest. We're going to have plenty of sunshine. It's going to be comfortable, and it's going to be less windy for some folks who have been experiencing some wind the last couple of days. It's going to get really warm for our weekend, so that's great if you're heading to the beach along the coast. Friday, 81 degrees for your high with plenty of sunshine. Saturday, 81 as well with plenty of sun. It's going to cool down for your Sunday, a little more mild, 75 degrees with lots of sunshine, and by your Monday, we're down to 73 degrees, so just a gorgeous couple of days ahead of us. Inland, it's going to be a bit warmer. On Friday, 91 degrees with plenty of sunshine. Same story for Saturday. Hot day on Saturday, 91 degrees. Make sure you're wearing a hat, maybe some sunblock, and drink plenty of water. It'll chill down though. I don't know if we can really say chill, but it will cool down for your Sunday, 85 degrees and sunny. In the mountains, well, that's the place to be if you like it a bit cooler. Friday, 70 degrees with plenty of sunshine. Saturday, sunny and warm, 74. So just a gorgeous weekend ahead of you here in the mountains. On Sunday, down to 71 degrees with sunshine, and we're back in the 60s for the beginning of your work week. So the next couple of days, just gorgeous and a great weekend to be outside. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra.
New questions today about the death of a polar bear at SeaWorld. Some animal advocates say she died of a broken heart. Sinja died yesterday. She lived at the park for nearly 20 years. Vets at the park noticed she had a loss of appetite and energy over the last week. They're now investigating the cause of death. People for the ethical treatment of animals claim the death could be connected to the absence of her longtime companion, Snowflake. Zookeepers moved her to the Pittsburgh Zoo in February. Balboa Park is becoming greener. City officials announced today that 10 park buildings have now achieved LEED certification. LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design and indicates a certain level of sustainability. San Diego's Green Building Council executive director says buildings offer huge opportunities for reducing our carbon footprint.
Buildings contribute in a huge way to our climate. They produce over 40% of greenhouse gas emissions nationwide and over 30% here in San Diego.
The San Diego Hall of Champions and the San Diego Museum of Man are some of the latest buildings to get certified. Upgrades include changing light bulb fixtures and wiring, and upgrading sinks and toilets, as well as rethinking how to manage lighting and air conditioning systems. According to the San Diego's Climate Action Plan, the city needs to cut its greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2035. A forest inspector who tried to rein in illegal logging in Peru has fled to the U.S. after getting death threats. He's now in exile as Peru backslides on environmental enforcement under a U.S. trade treaty. Associated Press reporter John Moan has the story.
A building in Peru is firebombed. The target, a provincial office of the country's forest inspection agency. Less than 2 months later, its director was fired and fled to the United States, fearing for his safety.
It's something that's very rough, difficult. I miss my family a lot. My siblings, my mother, my children, my wife are all there.
Mi madre, mis hijos, esposa se encuentran allá, ¿no?
And what prompted death threats against Rolando Navarro? It involves one of Peru's prized resources, the Amazon rainforest. As chief of the Forest Inspection Agency, Navarro led an unprecedented crackdown to protect vital rainforests against rampant illegal logging. His team's work resulted in nearly 1,800 metric tons of wood, 3 football fields worth of planks being denied entry into the U.S. in October of 2015. It sat on the docks in Houston for more than a year. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement destroyed the last of it this past March.
This is the first enforcement action against what's arguably the environmental crime of the century, which is stealing of the Amazon rainforest.
But a months-long AP investigation found that after the record seizure, Peru backed off on its commitment to fight illegal logging, and Washington's focus was elsewhere.
The last administration seemed so consumed with approving a Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement that it turned a blind eye toward Peruvian violations.
Congressman Lloyd Doggett of Texas is not confident that the Trump administration will carry on the fight. U.S. law makes these kinds of imports illegal. The United Nations says the illicit lumber trade is worth at least $50 billion a year. And the Peruvian state attorney in charge of environmental crime acknowledges there's been weak enforcement.
In Peru, there are great deficiencies in how we investigate crimes. That must be said.
Before he was fired, Navarro's team found in jungle inspections that officials had routinely falsified logging permits for years. An estimated 80% of Peru's timber exports are illegal.
There is a whole chain of distortion, and the corruption is astounding.
So far, only low-level players have been charged, but no convictions.
Before this, you could go in, you have a huge forest, there are no guards around, you cut that wood out, and as long as you can pay the bribe to get it out of the country, you were scot-free. All you had was profit, no more risk.
Peru's logging industry says it's lost about $140 million in sales after the crackdown in Houston. But Navarro says he's the one who's lost, forced to live in exile after trying to take on organized criminal logging. John Moan, Associated Press, Houston.
Coming up tonight on PBS News Hour, the science community is finding its political voice.
Science has been political since the time of Galileo. Nothing has changed between now and then. But it's important that we're nonpartisan because this is a march for science, and that unifies everyone around the world.
It's purported to be a demonstration for science, the very idea of science, the essence of science. Isn't that a wonderful idea?
This rally isn't about promoting a particular policy. It's about promoting the idea that the scientific enterprise as a whole improves our lives.
Plus, another march in Venezuela erupts as political tension rises. That's tonight on PBS News Hour, starting at 7, right here on KPBS. With the development of a young child on the line and an actual buzzer marking the end of their workday, every second counts for teachers. That's why they're under pressure to reduce the time they spend transitioning students from task to task. Teachers say there's a real art to it. KPBS education reporter Megan Burke says it's also a science.
Painting.
Any other colors, Anaya? Pink. Pink. I have a feeling you like pink.
Sidewalk art.
What are you drawing, Nathan? I'm drawing a pizza slice.
Hula hoops and hopscotch.
1 foot. Go. Whoa!
The preschool model at UC San Diego's Mesa Child Development Center is all about free choice, within reason.
It's time to clean up, friends!
When it's music time, teacher Natalie Graber has an elaborate system to get her preschoolers from controlled chaos outside to upright and facing forward inside.
I usually give a 5-minute warning every time we do any kind of a transition. That way it's a little easier on the kids. And then as they're doing that transition, I always ask if I can have helpers. Can you help sort those out? Can you and Katie help sort those out together? I've noticed a lot of kids really like to be helpers.
She then uses song.
All right, everybody, put your books on the shelf, on the shelf. Put your books on the shelf, on the shelf.
And familiar phrases and routines.
Can you find a seat, please? Now let's put on our seatbelts.
But even after all that, one boy turns his back to Graber and goes for a Dr. Seuss book. Another stares listlessly into space.
Young children, particularly children younger than 5 years of age, have trouble with cognitive flexibility tasks that we would find really straightforward, really simple.
Gideon Dayak is a UC San Diego professor and studies cognitive flexibility, or the ability to control our thinking so we can switch from one task to another.
We don't drink that water.
He says when young children don't follow demands, it isn't because they're ignoring you or choosing to misbehave. It's because that outer noodly layer of their brain is still developing.
The longer distance axons, the projections from a neuron to other neurons are getting sort of surrounded by these fatty sheaths called myelin sheaths. And that process greatly speeds up neural conduction, and it kind of reduces noise in neural conduction.
Put another way, it's like insulating the wires behind your drywall to keep the electrical currents going where they're supposed to go. What's also happening is a bit like editing clunky computer code or the first draft of a manuscript.
And the brain gets edited in the same way before birth, during infancy, and particularly in frontal cortices throughout childhood. There isn't a lot of proliferation of new neurons during childhood, but what there is pruning back. There's selective death of neurons that aren't well connected to other neurons, and there's pruning of synapses that aren't contributing to the overall coherence of different states of activation of the brain. So these editing processes are incredibly important in brain development. You know, we think of growth and development as getting bigger, but in the nervous system, it's also really important to be pruning back the parts and cutting back on the parts that aren't helpful, that aren't helping you, be the most efficient nervous system that you can be.
A blank stare or repetitive behavior in children is kind of like the spinning wheel on your computer screen. Their processing speed, that's actually a cognitive science term, is a little slow. Dayak says there are also things adults may take for granted. Kids are still learning to communicate and don't always pick up on body language and voice intonation, and their memories can't take on as much as ours. His advice to teachers and parents: get eye contact, give instructions in small bites, and repeat them a lot.
And what we saw in the classroom was a lot of what we call scaffolding, of adults interacting with kids in a way to help kind of guide and regulate and constrain their behavior. They're doing things to reduce the memory load for children to be able to follow through with an activity without having to remember a lot.
Songs go a long way too. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
That was part of our series, What Learning Looks Like. For more learning at the cellular level, go to kpbs.org/learning. This asteroid will pass by Earth tonight. It's the closest this particular object has been to our planet in 400 years, but it's still about 1 million miles away. NASA generated these radar images using their Deep Space Network antenna in California. It's managed by Jet Propulsion Laboratories in Pasadena. The largest of the asteroid's 2 lobes is estimated to be 2,000 feet across. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.